First one is trust in Bayes.
This was a whole lot of math, which I guess was interesting, but not something I particularly want to talk about. Did you have any parts of the math section that you wanted to pull out?
No, but remember we had 1 equals 2 after 8 levels of proofs or whatever, right?
Mm-hmm.
We talked about that, and you were pretty, not shaken, but disgruntled that you're like, you know what? I don't feel clean just saying, fuck it, I know it's wrong, even though I can't prove it. This is basically saying it's okay to do that in some circumstances.
Right.
And unfortunately, that's going to be taken as, licensed by anybody who wants to believe anything in the face of contradictory evidence. But it has a high bar. Yeah.
It has the weight of all of math behind it.
Right. Algebra is not, the basics of algebra are not wrong.
Yeah.
they actually can't be. That's the thrust of this post. Not just that algebra can't be wrong, but that, as he puts it succinctly, we should take into account our past experience of seeming contradictions which turned out to be themselves flawed. Which is to say, if you've encountered examples of this impossible thing was true, oh, no, I was mistaken. Well, that's actually evidence that you're mistaken this time, too. On the 1 equals 2 proof. Back to the quote, based on our inductive faith that we may likely have a similar experience in the future, we look for a flaw in the contrary evidence. This seems like a dangerous way to think, and it is dangerous. But, like I said, with the intellectual caveat that you're doing this with philosophical and cognitive rigor and not just doing this to defend your pet theory, I think that your inner Bayes fairy will yell at you if you're doing this wrong. I should hope, after some level of training.
Yes.
I love how every LessWrong post basically makes me think of the New Atheism Wars just because of the time they were written. But I don't think evolution or any of that comes up in this, but there was that common rebuttal of what would disprove evolution? And I forget who it was who was said to have said this, but I remember Dawkins quoting him saying, fossilized rabbits in the Precambrian. Honestly, that wouldn't falsify evolution for me. It would make me think that someone fucked up or is lying. Before it made me think that, I guess, my whole understanding of the history of the planet Earth is wrong. Right. Or not just my understanding, but everyone's. Right.
It would be a big red flag to look into this thing right now, and maybe after a lot more looking, that could start overturning evolution, but it wouldn't do it by itself.
Right. With that, 8-step proof that 1 equals 2, if this was driving mathematicians insane, then I'd be like, oh shit, maybe there's something to this. Yeah. But the fact that no one's lost any sleep over it then makes me pretty confident that I have nothing to worry about.
Yeah, if the more obsessive mathematicians start literally killing themselves because of this thing, then I'd be like, oh shit, something bad is happening in Mathland. I read at least one short story like that.
That's awesome. That's where he goes through all the proofs, and he talks about, actually, I forget the guy's name because I didn't pull it out in any of my notes here, but basically, Dutch booking proofs where if you go an infinite number of times, you always lose money or something. And Yukaski says, now, there's a number of replies I could give to this. I won't challenge the possibility of the game, which would be my typical response as an infinite set atheist, because I've never actually encountered an infinity. I like that answer. It's like, sure, yeah, if you do this forever, this happens. Like, yeah, but you know what? I'm never going to do that forever.
Right.
So I'm kind of just okay saying, sure, right?
Like when we did the little Dutch booking experiment in our LessWrong meetup, where in expectation I gain 20 cents per time we do it, and we did twice, and you were like, okay, I'm done.
Right.
It's like, wait a minute, I have currently gotten in real life 0 cents, and I'm hoping we go at least long enough till I get 20 cents once, and maybe infinite times, so I take all your money.
Well,
yeah, I don't have infinite time.
And as it worked out, neither of us lost a dime. So
yeah. He does do all the math stuff here to show how the 2 different types of infinity were not commensurate, which is why this fell apart, the supposed infinite Dutch booking. But the ultimate point that he's trying to make with this post, he says at the very bottom, is that Bayesian probability theory and decision theory are math. The formalisms provably follow from axioms, and the formalisms provably obeys those maxioms.
Axioms.
Sorry. Yes.
Yeah, you're really close.
And I think that is the major thing that I think he's trying to push with Bayesianism here. And it's interesting because that's not how we, by we, I mean you and me specifically, use it in our lives. We don't use it as a formal mathematical theory. We use it as a sort of guiding principle on how to approach things in our life generally. But he's making the point here that when he's talking about Bayesianism, especially in the context of decision theory, he's talking literally about a formal system that has axioms and rules. And just like math, if you apply it correctly and you have valid inputs, then you will always get valid outputs. As far as you can trust math, that is also how far you can trust Bayesianism when it is applied correctly and rigorously, which is a cool thing to point out.
Yeah, I mean, it's mathematical theorems, right? Like, there's nothing more foundational as far as my understanding of how these things work. So, yeah, at the end of the day, he's like, look, man, this is real math. Like, so if you can come up with a clever thought experiment where, something stupid happens, well, I don't know, forget it.
I do think it's important for us to not conflate the two, because we do call ourselves Bayesians often, or Bayesian rationalists, and we like Bayes' theory, and we draw attention to how it can guide us in the real world. But I think it'd be a really good idea to stress maybe once a year at our Bayesian church gatherings or whatever the hell we end up doing, that we are not doing actual math. What we are doing is different from this, and we should not try to take the weight and power of math as justification for how we live our lives. They're two different things.
Yes. Maybe one should be called, Bayesian decision theory, and one could be called maybe Bayesianism, which I don't like isms, but if I had to, because I don't think a probability theorist would call themselves, would say that they're Bayesists, right?
Yeah.
But that's the the one sentence version of that is an understanding that I don't, when I get in my car and start it to go pick up groceries, I don't know that there's not a squirrel hiding in the engine block that's going to be ripped apart when I start the car on, right? But I'm sure enough that I'm not going to bother checking. It's an understanding that my mental model of reality is probabilistic, not certain, right?
Yes.
So yeah, I think so that's what we're doing. If you're doing decision trees or something, like they teach over at the Guild of the Rose, you're throwing some actual math in there, and the more refined the technique, the better, the more mileage you can get out of it. But I think just the framework by which you orient yourself towards reality is what we're talking about.
Yes.
Right on.
Shall we go on to the second post, which is much more about the whole how to live your life thing?
Yeah, let's do it.
Next post is something to protect.
Popular. I love it. He opens it with saying, in the gestalt of Japanese fiction, and I put in brackets, and Marvel movies, one finds this oft-repeated motif. Power comes from having something to protect.
Whoa, hey, hold on. I must stop you, because I think that is definitely not true of Marvel movies. He specifically calls out a typical Marvel movie in the post.
He says, in Western comics, magic comes first, then the purpose. Acquire amazing powers, decide to protect the innocent. In Japanese fiction, often it's the other way around. However, in Marvel movies, typically, they're heroic before they get their powers. Captain America was getting his ass whooped trying to do the right thing before he had the power to not get his ass whooped.
I suppose that's true of Captain America.
I told you wouldn't like my second TED Talk.
All right. I thank you for doing that.
Yep. But we can.
I guess they are trying to do it more with the MCU stuff that came around in the early aughts, mid aughts. I don't exactly remember when all that started.
I think Iron Man came out in 2008.
Okay, the mid to late aughts then. I like the distinction that he drew here between Japanese fiction and American comics, because it does seem like very much in the Japanese anime manga style, at least of that earlier time, 80s, 2000s, it was very much I am powered by my desperate desire to do a thing. Like, the more you had to do a thing, the more power you got, which has been, I guess, adopted a bit more in the West, but it's less. Like you said, it was first you get bit by a spider, then you're like, oh, I have this great power. I guess that comes with great responsibility that I got to use. And the aspect of desperation that drove the characters, and that is how they found the power, was a really neat thing about anime that was very cool when you were first seeing it coming over.
Yeah, I think for me, maybe part of the reason I wanted to, and this is not the point of the post, but part of the reason that line didn't resonate with me is I haven't consumed enough of that kind of Japanese fiction. Like, the only one that I can think of is Kenshin.
Okay.
And
And Kenshin is actually a pretty good example, isn't it?
I think so.
But he keeps getting better as his conditions are more dire.
And his something to protect, is what actually makes him the best he can be.
Mm-hmm.
But the, like other examples, I don't know, Attack on Titan, you've got the crying, screaming protagonist. At least at the first few episodes, I fell off fairly quickly.
It was, yeah.
And that seems like a pretty common trope, and I hate that.
Well, it got it got flanderized, I guess, over time.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
And then Death Note, he was with great power comes great responsibility all the way, right?
Yeah, he was definitely much more of the Marvel style.
Yeah.
The power comes first thing.
In only that exact way. Right. He did it to become the best supervillain he possibly could be.
Yeah.
All right. So, go ahead and grab some more of these. You pulled out some of the quotes, but I was basically going to pull out everything you did. So
he goes back to the saving 400 lives with certainty versus saving 500 lives with 90% probability and no lives with 10%. We talked about that the last several episodes. He comes back to this and says, a lot of people may be tempted to grandstand saying, how dare you gamble with people's lives? Obviously go with the 400 lives with certainty. You can't take a 10% probability that 500 people are going to die. But when you're actually making this decision and you don't know what's going to happen, maybe your daughter is one of those 500 people. If you don't know what the actual outcomes are going to be and your daughter's life is on the line, maybe then you feel a bit impelled to shut up and multiply and notice that you have an 80% chance of saving her in the first case and a 90% chance of saving her in the second. Because in the first case, you save 400 lives and the other 100 are gone. When you have your daughter to protect, then suddenly you actually care that there's a 10% greater chance that she's going to live.
I love this because this actually really perfectly drives home. Intellectually, it makes perfect sense, right? The math says 450 on average, as opposed to 400 for sure. But the second he says, but if your precious daughter is one of the 500, then it's like, oh, shit. Suddenly, it could be a 10% chance to save them. Now that I'm imagining a strong emotional connection to the actual outcome rather than just, numbers on a chalkboard, then it's like, viscerally, I need to know which one's the better choice, and I'm totally going to do it, right?
Yeah. And that is basically his entire point through this post, is that when you actually really fucking care about the outcome, then you stop becoming attached to, I have to support this position for whatever reason, and you become insanely attached to, I need to know which position is the better position. And I believe Julia Galoff calls that the difference between the soldier mindset and the scout mindset. When the results really matter, what you care about is knowing what's the better course of action to get the results you want, rather than just what is the argument that I'm supposed to support. And that is why he says having something to protect is the only way to truly be a rationalist, because otherwise there's just so much drive as a human to sometimes support certain arguments or to be lazy and fall back to heuristics that everyone else is using, when suddenly it's really important. Like, then all of a sudden you have a huge motivation to really get down and find out the correct answer. That is the whole gist behind this. That is what you need to drive yourself to actually find Bayesianism and apply it correctly, rigorously, and often.
I agree. I don't want to belabor on it too long, other than just to consider the possibility that one might find compelling reasons to lean in more into soldier mindset than scout mindset if you have something important to protect going on, because that thing might be more important to you than, an honest evaluation of the evidence or something, right? Let's say it was 80% probability of saving 500 lives instead of 90. Oh, wait, then the outcomes are the same, aren't they? Let's say it's 70 or 50. You don't care because it's your daughter. You might bolster your case with, and this is why soldiering is kind of dangerous when trying to be a good rationalist, but you might bolster your case with saying, look, you might grandstand and say it's more lives. How could you condemn them to death? Yada, yada. You might make all the bad arguments in favor of choosing the lower likely outcome because one person in there is someone you really care about. And frankly, that's totally something I would do. I'm imagining two different pools of people, I should say.
No. The whole point is that there's only the one pool of people.
All right. Well, in my hypothetical, there's two.
Then that's the wrong hypothetical, because obviously if what you really care about is the daughter, then you choose whichever one lets you save your daughter.
That's what I'm saying.
But if
that's
not the case here.
But if you're just the boat captain choosing how to exercise all the resources of like life rafts and stuff or whatever, right? And you're making this real life decision, and you don't know anyone else on board. They're all just customers. You're going to go with the one that saves the probabilistically max number of lives.
Well, if one of them is your daughter, but you don't know which one, then you go for the probabilistically max number of lives.
Yes.
That's why if you have the 500 lives and it's a 50-50 probability, then you would go with the 400 lives with certainty, because that saves more lives in expectation and thus maximizes the chance of your daughter being saved.
Maybe I illustrated my point poorly and too strongly, because it was so absurd that, or like so poorly rational that you had to jump in. My point is that you might use arguments to support your bad position because you really care about the outcome that you're choosing, right? So that's why I say that soldier mindset might be risky there, or rather, it's great for you, but it's risky in general for trying to do like the most actual good, right?
Yes, that's the point. You aren't trying to do the most actual good. You're trying to maximize your outcome.
Right, and your outcome is fuck everyone else. I care about my daughter.
Yes.
Yeah.
That is what he is saying. When you have a goal you really want, when you have something you actually want to protect, you will use rationality to achieve that goal. You're assuming that for some reason his goal is to save the maximum number of people, and that is not the case at all. His goal is to save his daughter.
Right. I should make up an entirely different hypothetical. I guess my point is that you might use rationality to reasonably resort to making bad arguments that sound compelling to convince people to do the thing that you really care about instead of the thing that would best interest them, because you really want your daughter to live or something, right?
Yes, that is, again, using rationality if that is going to achieve your goal.
Oh, okay. I guess I would consider that more... if you're knowingly making bad arguments to persuade people to do the thing that is in their worst interest but is in your best interest, I wouldn't consider that ideal rationality, more like the dark side rationality stuff.
Yeah, that's dark arts rationality. And as a society, we want to discourage people from doing that because of the reason we want to discourage anyone from doing antisocial stuff. But the whole point is that if you were truly exercising rationality, you would do the thing that maximizes your outcome.
Yeah, no, I get you. I feel like I belabored on that too long. And maybe I didn't articulate my thought all the way beforehand. I feel like I think that you gave a very good example of how you would, if you had something to protect, look for things that actually get you your goal, as opposed to just following nice rules. Yeah, it would change your orientation to the problem, which is totally legit, or rather, which makes sense. I guess. I mean,
we're getting into the case where what we're trying to do is align people's individual goals with society's broader goals, but that's different from why would you use rationality in the first place?
Yeah, no, totally fair. I feel like I had a point that I failed to make, and now I'm struggling to remember. So let's push past it.
Stephen, thank you for joining me again one last time. We talked past each other a little bit because the post is about instrumental rationality, like how to get what you want in a particular situation. When you want something, rationality is one of the premier tools for figuring out how to actually get that.
It's the premier tool, sir.
Okay. It's certainly definitely in the tool bucket on the very top shelf. Tool bucket? They have shelves, yeah?
And I mean, of course your buckets have shelves, but it's also the tool that tells you which other tools to go get.
Exactly. Then we started talking about what if it's rational to kill 100 people to save your daughter or poison the beliefs of the people around you. In my mind, when I was editing, it reminded me of the whole problem with FTX where Sam Bankman-Fried is like, well, you know what? I want billions of dollars right now so I can direct them to the best use that they could have. So I'm going to just scam thousands of people out of all their money so that I can use it for what I think is best. So that's super rational, right? It is not, as we covered in the episode on that, primarily because the world still exists after you've done that, and you have destroyed many things doing that. Maybe sometimes for you personally, it might behoove you to do something like that if what you really care about is saving your daughter, even if it means that they're going to string you up and slowly torture you to death for what you did. But in terms of general ethics, the study of how to all get along together and to get other people to do things that are good for ourselves and each other, that is not a rational thing to do because you are going to be burning the commons, destroying the ability for people to cooperate, and in general, making the world much worse overall. So I think that is where we had the major disconnect, that it might be rational in one particular instance to do something like that, but it is not rational overall to use that as a guiding principle of I just do whatever I need to get what I want, because that actually has much worse effects in the long run.
I totally agree. I think I made that whole section, I don't know how much you cleaned up, but it was way less coherent than it was in my head. And like the short version of what I was trying to say was that in certain circumstances, it's rational to use dark side epistemology because you have goals that you care about more than the truth. Your goal is save this person or whatever.
But in the long run, it's always bad.
Right. It's never rational to defect. Well, I mean, so this is where if you have something to protect that is more important to you than the commons. Like, there was that really cool movie, John Q? I can't remember what it was called. I think it started Denzel
the
Washington.
one where
he takes a hospital hostage because his son needs a new heart. And it's awesome. I think I saw it probably when it came out 15 years ago. It's not a spoiler. I think he goes to jail at the end, which makes sense. You know, he put a gun to people's head. And yeah, I think that you're supposed to leave the movie feeling like, you know, that guy's awesome. It sucks that he had to do that, but it's like, yes, I'm willing to violate, you know, like if you carry your kid to the hospital with a broken bone or whatever, you don't expect the doctors to drop everyone else and rush to your kid, even though you would like them to, because you realize how insane that would be.
I mean, the game theoretic correct action for the rest of society after he's done that is to take the heart back out of the kid, because otherwise people are going to be incentivized to do this.
I mean, yes, makes one wonder what they would do on Dothalan, although I don't suppose that circumstance would arise there, but something that insane did.
Maybe that's what the surreptitious head removers are for.
Could well be it. Well, I appreciate the clarification and the ability to more succinctly deliver what I was trying to say.
Okay. Once you have something you really want, you start using all your tools to get to that thing, whether that includes lying to people or not. That
actually might be the point that I was trying to make. Maybe I shouldn't have gone on the whole tangent about soldier and scout mindset. You know, you care about rationality, you care about the truth, being honest and being a fair person, whatever, right up until something more than your life is at stake. Then you're like, okay, now I'm going to try and get it done no matter what. Even if I have to lie, kill, and steal, right?
And to get it done no matter what, you want the best tools that you can possibly get your hands on, right?
Right.
And that is why you would use rationality. Once you really fucking care to that degree, you're like, this is the best tool for the job. And the best tool for the job is thinking about things rationally and multiplying the numbers and seeing where your greatest chance of success lies.
Yes. Well put.
All right. Eliezer does go on to say, do not mistake me and think I am advocating that rationalists should pick out a nice altruistic cause by way of having something to do, because rationality isn't all that important by itself. No one can just pick out a cause like that because you feel you need a hobby. Go looking for a good cause and your mind will just fill in the standard cliches. Stephen, should I even draw in the obvious EA parallel, seeing as that we've just been talking about recently?
I think it can be explained in under a minute, which is that your average EA will look to the community and say, hey, what's the most important cause? Because I care, and do that. But what they're doing there is different than trying to... They're not... I like the line in here that no one masters the way until more than their life is at stake.
Yeah.
Your average EA isn't somebody who's in that circumstance. So I see how it relates, but it's not quite the same. The people who are looking for the cure to something tremendous, you know, like the ones maybe who are doing the intense research might be closer to the ones who are driven this way, right?
I don't want to say that the average EA is like that. I think most people are strongly driven to try to help the world and to save lives. But if I were to try to do that kind of thing, I feel like I would be doing the sort of picking a cause thing, as opposed to really actually caring about something that is intensely important to me.
Oh, see, I didn't even...
I don't know. Does that make me super selfish?
No. I think it makes you better at this sort of thing than I am. I did the lazy third option, which is I checked the box on GiveWell's website of give this money to the cause that you think needs it most right now. So like I didn't check bed nets or give directly or whatever. I checked the box that says you guys spend it to wherever it needs or wherever it's needed. You guys do the thinking. I don't care.
I think that is the correct thing to do for most people. And since we were just talking about aligning personal incentives with social incentives, the whole thing that we've done where there is pressure by society to get everyone to give 10% to an effective cause, it's basically a good thing. It's doing this whole aligning social incentives with personal incentives thing. That is not a thing that drives you to adopt rationality and to use it relentlessly in your life. No. Because, yeah, you don't have that driving, burning passion. You have social pressure, and that's good. But it's not having something to protect in caps, like is pointed out in this post.
Yeah, that's why EA and rationality have an overlapping Venn diagram, but aren't one-to-one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, and I think a lot of the people who work directly in EA are the ones that do have a more burning drive like that.
Totally. Maybe I'm simple-minded. Maybe the average, EA puts in more work than I did, but I'm going off of myself there. So
I almost feel like there's a member in good standing in the laity, if you're giving your 10% and you're being as effective as you can be, and then there's like the cleric class who actually are driven and do the work and research to see what's the best and are constantly updating their models and their quality adjusted dollars per life saved thing.
I think you're right.
And we use the term EA for both of them, but they feel like slightly different things.
I think this is nicely related to, we use Bayesianism for two different things, right?
Yeah.
All right. It kind of comes full circle. Maybe you have like an EA. I don't want to actually give them quick labels because I feel like it needs more deliberation. I was going to say you have like participants and forerunners or something, right? And I'm much more like the back of the participant line than I am in the forerunner line.
Right. And I think there's nothing wrong with that.
Not me either.
He does end by saying, but if you have a cause like that, it is right and proper to wield your rationality in its service, which is fantastic.
Yeah.
That is what rationality is for.
I agree.
For our next episode, we will be covering the LessWrong posts, 3 of them this time. Newcomb's Problem and Regret of Rationality, that is 1. The Parable of the Dagger as 2, and The Parable of Hemlock as 3.
Heck yeah.